The air in the room feels different when you finally realize the walls are closing in, not because of the architecture, but because you have been here before. You are standing at the threshold of what you believed was a new beginning, yet the scent of the air, the coldness of the floor, and the heavy silence in your chest are hauntingly familiar. This is the beginning of the content, the moment where the veil begins to tear, and you must understand that your life has not been a series of random events, but a meticulously orchestrated loop. You have been running for years, perhaps for 20 or 30 years, only to find yourself back at the exact same point of impact. Look closely at the person currently standing across from you, or the failure that just knocked on your door. Does their face not seem like a mask worn by someone from your past? Do the words they use to hurt you not sound like an echo of a conversation you had 5 years ago? This is the echo chamber of your life.
It is a psychological prison where the bars are made of your own unresolved trauma and the locks are turned by your subconscious mind. You think you are making choices, but you are merely following an invisible script written in a language you have forgotten how to read. Your body knows the truth before your mind dares to admit it. Think of the way your heart rate spikes when you meet someone exciting. That isn't chemistry. It is a warning. It is your nervous system recognizing a familiar predator, a familiar pattern that guarantees the same tragic ending you've endured 10 times over. We often mistake the intensity of a recurring nightmare for the passion of a new dream. You are trapped in a temporal loop, a cycle where the faces change, but the pain remains identical. Why does the same betrayal keep surfacing in every relationship? Why does every career move end in the same crushing sense of inadequacy?
It is as if a shadow is walking 3 steps ahead of you, poisoning every well before you arrive to drink. In the shadows of your mind, there is a blueprint. It was drafted in the silence of your childhood and inked with the tears of your first catastrophic failure. This blueprint dictates every micro-expression you make, every word you choose, and every person you allow into your inner sanctum. You are projecting a frequency that only certain types of chaos can hear. You are a magnet for the very things you claim to despise. But why? What is the utility of this suffering? Why does your brain insist on dragging you back to the scene of the crime every single time you try to escape? There is a key, hidden beneath layers of denial and the thick, suffocating fog of your daily routine. To find it, we must go deeper than surface-level habits. We must peel back the skin of your reality to reveal the raw, pulsing nerves of your subconscious origin.
We are looking for patient zero, the first moment the script was written. Only by identifying the ink can we learn how to burn the page. You feel it now, don't you? That slight tremor in your hands, the realization that you are being watched by your own past. The door behind you has already locked, and the only way out is through the dark. But before we can dismantle the cage, we must first understand the terrifying precision with which it was built, and why your soul seems to crave the very bars that hold it captive. The patterns are screaming at you, and it is finally time to listen to what they are trying to hide. Listen closely, for that scream is not a random noise. It is a symphony composed in the nursery of your forgotten years, a haunting melody played on the strings of your nervous system. You believe you are the architect of your life, the conscious pilot of your destiny, but you are merely a passenger in a vessel steered by a ghost.
This ghost is the repetition complex, the silent director of your recurring tragedies. It is a primal, cold, and terrifyingly efficient mechanism buried deep within the folds of your subconscious, acting not out of malice, but out of a perverted sense of loyalty to your earliest wounds. Think of your mind as an ancient, crumbling mansion. While you occupy the brightly lit rooms of the now, The foundations were laid down when you were 0 to 7 years old. During those formative years, your brain functioned as a hypersensitive recording device, capturing every cold shoulder from a distracted parent, every sharp word from a distant caregiver, and every moment of suffocating isolation. To a child, these experiences are not just memories, they are the laws of physics. They form what I call the faulty operating system. This software was coded in a state of raw survival, designed to navigate the specific terrain of your childhood home.
The tragedy, however, is that you are still running that same 1001 code today, trying to navigate a vast ocean using a map of a tiny, stagnant pond. Why does your soul crave the very bars that hold it captive? The answer lies in the subconscious mind's obsession with the known. To your biological self, the unknown is death. A familiar hell is always safer than an unfamiliar heaven. This is the repetition complex in its purest, most predatory form. It seeks out partners who mirror the emotional unavailability of your father. It drives you toward career failures that echo the inadequacy your mother made you feel. You are not unlucky in love or business. You are a heat-seeking missile for the specific brand of pain that feels like home.
This mechanism operates with a misplaced desire for completeness. Your subconscious believes that if it can just recreate the exact scenario of your original trauma, the same coldness, the same betrayal, the same abandonment, and this time win or fix it, the wound will finally heal. But the script is rigged. You keep casting the same types of villains in your life's play, hoping for a different ending, only to find yourself bleeding out on the same stage night after night. You are trapped in a loop of reenactment, a psychological haunting where the past refuses to stay buried. Can you feel the weight of it? That suffocating sense of déjà vu when a new relationship begins to sour in the exact same way as the last three. That is the blueprint asserting its dominance. It is the invisible hand that narrows your vision, making you blind to healthy opportunities while illuminating the path toward destruction with a neon glow.
But one must wonder, if this blueprint is so deeply ingrained, so fundamentally a part of your identity, what happens when you try to tear it up? What terrifying version of yourself is waiting beneath the layers of these repetitive failures? The blueprint is precise, yes, but it is also a lie. A lie you have been telling yourself since you were 5 years old to survive a world that felt too big. The question is no longer why you are suffering, but rather, what is the specific trigger that activates this ancient code? What is the one sensory input, the one look, or the one tone of voice that causes your subconscious to bypass your logic and hand the keys back to the ghost of your childhood? We have identified the cage, but we have yet to feel the cold metal of the lock, and the key is hidden in a place you have been taught never to look. You are standing in the dark, fingers grazing the rusted tumblers of a door you thought was sealed shut by the mere passage of time. But time is a liar.
That key we spoke of is not hidden in a dusty chest. It is calcified within the marrow of your bones, forged in the heat of a house that perhaps felt more like a courtroom or a silent tomb. Your childhood was not a sequence of innocent years. It was a blueprint of survival, a rigorous training ground where you learned that love was not a right, but a currency to be earned, or a weapon to be feared. Think of the first time you felt the oxygen leave the room because a parent entered in a certain mood. You didn't need words to understand the shift. You read the microscopic tension in their jaw, the heavy cadence of their footsteps, the way they didn't look at you. This was your first lesson in the dark art of body language. You became an involuntary expert in the atmospheric pressure of human emotion. These parental dynamics, the silent treatment that felt like an eternity, the conditional praise that arrived only when you performed, the abandonment that occurred even while they were standing in the same room, created your core emotional template. You were a piece of soft clay, and their shadows were the hands that molded your deepest insecurities. To navigate these shadows effectively, one must acknowledge the strength of the collective circle that gathers here. To our loyal followers, your presence and engagement are the vital engine that keeps this dark light burning through the fog of ignorance. This trinity of action, the like, the share, the subscribe,
is the essential fuel we require to continue piercing the veil. It takes only 10 seconds, a mere heartbeat in the grand architecture of your awakening, yet it ensures that these truths are never silenced by the algorithm's cold and indifferent hand. We move forward because you provide the momentum.
Now look closer at the unfinished scene. Your mind is a relentless playwright that refuses to accept a tragic ending. When you were 6 or 8 or 12, there was a moment, a scene, where you were powerless. Perhaps you were silenced when you should have screamed, or you were ignored when you desperately needed to be seen. The brain detests an open loop. It craves the click of a closed circuit. This is why, as an adult, you are subconsciously drawn to people who mirror the very architects of your original pain. You aren't unlucky in love or business. You are a heat-seeking missile for the familiar hell. You find a partner who is emotionally distant because your subconscious believes that this time, if you can just be perfect enough, you will finally win the validation your father withheld 30 years ago. You are recreating the stage, hiring new actors to play the old ghosts, all in a desperate, frantic attempt to rewrite the ending of a play that finished its first run decades ago. You are trapped in a loop of repetition, a psychic haunting where you are both the victim and the director. But why does the body respond so violently to these echoes? Why does your heart race and your palms sweat when a stranger uses a specific tone of voice that you haven't heard since you were 7? The answer lies in the way your nervous system has memorized the shape of your chains. And the ghost is now ready to show you how it pulls the strings of your physical form. The strings do not merely twitch your muscles. They have woven themselves into the very fabric of your identity. You recognize the weight of the iron around your ankles, and in a twisted, sickening way, that weight provides you with a sense of balance.
This is the paradox of the human psyche. We would rather drown in the freezing waters we know than step onto a shore we have never seen. You call it fate. You call it bad luck. You call it a pattern, as if it were an external storm passing over your life. But the scariest message I have to deliver to you, the one that will make your skin crawl with the realization of your own complicity, is that this repetition is not a haunting. It is a choice. You are not being chased by your past. You are inviting it to dinner every single night because you are terrified of the silence that a new guest might bring. Think of your career, that stagnant pond where you have sat for 5, 10, or perhaps 15 years. You complain about the suffocating atmosphere, the lack of recognition, and the slow decay of your ambitions. Yet every time a door opens toward a radical shift, your heart rate spikes, not with excitement, but with a primal, visceral terror.
You retreat. You find a flaw in the new opportunity. Why? Because the misery of your current cubicle is a known misery. You have mapped the shadow. You know exactly how much it will hurt today. The unknown of success, however, is a void. In that void, you don't know who you are. Without your grievances, you are a stranger to yourself. And that is a death more frightening than any professional stagnation. Observe your finances, the way you perpetually hover at the edge of ruin or the threshold of just enough. You might have earned $10,000 or $50,000 more this year, yet by the end of the month, the balance returns to that same hauntingly familiar low. This is not an accounting error. It is a psychological thermostat. You are sabotaging your wealth because abundance feels like a foreign language you are too old to learn. You return to the scarcity of your childhood because the hunger feels like home. You are unconsciously burning the excess to maintain the cold temperature your nervous system was programmed to endure when you were only 6 or 7 years old. In your relationships, the horror reaches its zenith. Look at the face of the person you claim to love, or the string of ghosts who preceded them. Do you see the pattern? You keep casting the same lead actor in different masks. You seek out the same emotional unavailability, the same subtle cruelty, or the same desperate neediness. You are attempting to master the past by recreating the original trauma, hoping that this time the ending will change. But the script is written in ink that dried 20 years ago. You aren't looking for a partner. You are looking for a familiar wound to lick. You stay in the prison of a toxic connection because the bars are the only things you know how to hold on to when the world starts to shake. This is the scariest message. Your misery is your comfort zone.
You are addicted to the chemical hit of your own disappointment. You have built a fortress out of your failures because as long as you are failing in a way you understand, you feel safe. But what happens when the walls start to crumble? What happens when the ghost finally stops pulling the strings and leaves you standing alone in the dark, with nothing but the terrifying realization that the cage door was never actually locked? The question isn't why you are trapped, but rather, what are you willing to sacrifice to stop being your own jailer? The answer lies in the one place you refuse to look, where the shadow of your true potential is waiting to demand a price you aren't yet sure you can pay. The price you fear is not a loss of life, but the total annihilation of the narrative that has kept you comfortably miserable.
To stop being your own jailer, you must first admit that you have grown to love the weight of the chains. They are familiar, and in their cold embrace you found a twisted kind of safety. But the door is indeed unlocked, and the shadow waiting on the other side is not a monster. It is the version of you that refused to die. To claim that future, you must undergo a systematic dismantling of the architecture of your soul. The first incision is radical acknowledgement. This is not a mere intellectual realization. It is a visceral, bone-deep confrontation with the patterns that have governed your every breath. You must look at your failures, your repetitive heartbreaks, and your self-sabotage, and stop blaming the stars or the ghosts of your past. Look at the way your hands tremble when you are close to success, or how your voice thins when you should speak your truth. See the pattern for what it is, a script written by a frightened child and performed by a ghost.
You are currently a puppet whose strings are pulled by hands that have been dead for 20 years. To acknowledge this is to feel the cold realization that your entire identity may be a fabrication designed to survive a war that ended decades ago. Can you bear the sight of your own emptiness once the mask is stripped away? Once the wound is open, you must move to the second stage, reparenting the inner. This is where most falter, for it requires you to descend into the basement of your subconscious and face the phantom of your youngest self. That child is still there, trapped in a loop of 4 or 5 foundational traumas, waiting for a protector who never came. You must become that protector. You must provide the marrow and the sinew that the past denied you. It is a haunting process of giving that starving, shivering version of yourself the validation, the boundaries, and the fierce protection it lacked.
You are not just remembering the past, you are rewriting the emotional DNA of your history. You are reaching through time to tell that small, terrified creature that the siege is over, even as the echoes of the cannons still ring in your ears. The final act of defiance is conscious choice. This is the moment you choose to glitch the machine. Every day, your old programming will offer you 1,000 opportunities to react with your usual cowardice, your usual anger, or your usual silence. Conscious choice is the 3 seconds of silence between the stimulus and the response, where you realize you are no longer a machine. It is the agonizing effort of choosing a path that feels unnatural because it is new. You must act against your own nature until that nature is reshaped. It is the choice to stand still when every nerve ending screams at you to run. You stand now at the threshold of a terrifying autonomy.
The cycle is cracked, the ink is wet, and the pen is heavy in your hand. But do not mistake this beginning for an end. The shadow you cast is growing longer, and it is beginning to take a shape you might finally recognize. The map to your true potential is etched into the very scars you have spent a lifetime trying to hide, and the next step requires you to read them in a language you haven't yet learned to speak. Are you ready to hear what your silence has been trying to tell you?